Greetings, housemates, and welcome to Learn to Play Endless Legend. I'm Phwop, and we're going to be covering in a series of videos some of the trickier mechanics of this excellent 4X strategy game that mixes high fantasy, technology, the best of civilization, and the best of Heroes of Might and Magic, with a bunch of clever and, I think, really well-made mechanics. So, the first thing I'm going to talk about is what empire or faction, they refer to them both ways, to start the game with if you're new to the game, which ones are trickier to play with, and which ones just require some knowledge of the base mechanics to play, and then they're not so confusing. So, let's go to starting a new game. I do suggest playing the introduction tutorial or watching me play the introduction tutorial, a video I already have out in this playlist. So, selecting your empire is easy enough. You click here and you're given 10 choices. It may look like 11, but that's because the Mizari and the Vaulters are really just a reskin of each other, including unit reskins. But that's just their jam. That was a special promo. So, I have backed Amplitude on all of their Kickstarters, and I have all of their games, and I love this studio. Endless Space is the Master of Orion type clone. It's a great game, and it was the forerunner to Endless Legend, but I think it's a little boring, especially compared to the diversity that you can find in Endless Legends. Plus, ground combat's awesome. So let's go through them in order and then have a little summary. So the Wild Walkers, not a hard faction to begin the game with. Good starting choice. Their main victory type is Wonder. That is, when you finish their main quest, and the main quest is just going to pop up on turn 2, and it's going to give you objectives, and you complete them, you get rewards, and you continue on through the quest. They're not always easy. Sometimes they take lots of turns to complete. Sometimes you can finish them up in a few turns. But generally, a great way to go through the game. Each faction has its own main quest. Very few of the factions expect to win the game by completing their quest, but it's totally possible. And following the quest is a good way to get an idea of how to play that faction if that's what you want to do. So just start following that faction main quest if you don't understand a faction, and it will draw you out into playing with those mechanics. The Broken Lords. I don't suggest starting the game with these guys. They are very different from the standard gameplay of the other factions because they don't use the food resource at all, and they're heavily dependent on the dust resource. Their main victory type is Expansion, that is controlling 80% of the regions in the world, which takes a long time and requires a lot of infrastructure knowledge. If you want to know how to build a large empire, then these are a good race to go with. Also, their unique mechanic is quite different, so you can expect a very different gameplay. However, if you're learning the game, I would not suggest starting with these guys, as it is so different from the other races that you'll have a hard time transferring what you learn here into other games. The Vaulters. I think the Vaulters are an excellent starting choice. Their main victory type is Science, so it's always easy to understand what to do. More science. And there are no slouches anywhere else in the game either. Science victory requires you to achieve the last scientific era, that is era 6, and research 5 of the 6 technologies there, which are incredibly and take an incredibly long time to research, but give you incredible benefits to your empire as well. Due to the way research works, you can be incredibly flexible based on what you do research and what you don't, which means that Vaulters can actually be quite adaptive while going for this science victory. The Mizari are the same as the Vaulters. The Necrophages, I don't suggest playing your first game with these guys, but they're one of my favorites, and they're great for getting a handle on how to fight how to wage war, and how to grow cities quickly, both in terms of population and on the strategic map. Your cities can grow through the production of districts. So if you want to get a handle on city building and nurturing, as well as combat, the Necrophages are a good race for that. Maybe once you understand the basics of the game, that you can appreciate the Necrophages. You will want to look into understanding their recycling trait from the very get-go, as it is important and a little confusing. But their main victory type is elimination. Now, generally, you will wind up with a expansion or supremacy victory type. Elimination is where there is absolutely no other players left. However, it's much more likely you'll control 80% of the map before you eliminate everyone, or that nobody but you will control their primary capital. Now, it doesn't have to be your doing. As long as you're the only one left controlling your initial capital, you win the game. That is the supremacy victory, and it's pretty easy to, instead of completely wipe someone out, to simply take all the capitals in the game first. The Ardent Mages I do not suggest starting out as their magic mechanics are a little confusing and a lot of tricksy to use effectively. You'll want to look up how to do that somewhere else or watch one of the videos I'll produce later about it. But for now, I would say, trust me, these guys have a complex mechanic on top of the already complex game. Their main victory type is science, which does make it fairly easy to know what to do, but doing it well is hard. The Roving Clans are a great race to start out as. Their victory type, economic, means that you simply have to have gathered X amount of gold from the beginning of the game. You don't have to, it doesn't matter if you spent it or you're stockpiling it. You simply have to have gathered in a normal game on a normal map size over 500,000 gold. And you'll be victorious once you've achieved, or dust, excuse me. Once you've gathered enough dust, you'll have won. And of course, you don't have to stockpile it, so you can spit it on stuff, and dust is probably the most flexible resource in the game, as you can use it to buy production, therefore buildings and units, on a whim, or heroes, or bribe people, or use it for various magic-y stuff. Not a simple and flexible race, with a lot of movement points, which can be really useful. A lot of mobility. The Drakon. I suggest starting with this race. It's a good one. They are heavily diplomatic focused. Diplomacy victories come from accumulating diplomacy points throughout the course of the game. You get 1 diplomacy point when you are neither allied nor at peace with another faction per turn. You get 2 if you're at peace with a faction each turn, and each turn you gain 4 diplomacy points if you are allies with a faction. So simply having more allies and being at peace will cause your diplomacy points to rise. There is actually no other effect of diplomacy points at all. So you can do whatever you want as long as you're being peaceful with other people, and you will eventually achieve a diplomacy victory, assuming someone else doesn't achieve another one first. So it's pretty straightforward. Just be peaceful. It makes life easy for you, and you can focus on building up your cities and researching things, and generally playing the game without fighting other empires. So the Drakon are pretty standard. They're probably the closest to the usual 4X high fantasy race that you'll encounter in Endless Legend, and yeah, they're not too bad. They can also forcibly make people their allies or peaceful, which is pretty sweet. The Cultists are not what I would suggest as a starting race, although once you get the hang of them, they're not really that complex. Their main victory type is supremacy, so it's suggested that you try and oust everyone else from their capitals to win with the Cultists. They can only build 1 city, and can only control 1 region, which means they'll never actually win through expansion. But it's really interesting the way their mechanics allow them to circumvent having a very wide empire, and they can focus on an incredibly tall one city victory. So for interesting mechanics, the cultists are really cool. The AI plays them really well. They're pretty strong naturally, and once you do understand the base game, their mechanics are not too hard to understand. The Forgotten, I would not suggest starting with the Forgotten, as they don't use one of the primary resources in the game, science, and they're instead heavily dust and espionage focused. Their main victory type is supremacy, so it's suggested that you oust everyone else from their capitals while maintaining your own. And they are very good at stealth mechanics. Their armies are invisible most of the time, and generally getting around the map and using the new infiltration mechanics in the game added in the expansion that they came with. So if you want to get a handle on how infiltration works, go ahead and play these guys. And if you're looking for a real challenge, then pick them up, as they are very different due to their lack of science. And I think they're underpowered right now is what I've heard is the general consensus, but hey. It might just be that they're tough to play, or it takes a very intricate understanding. It may be they're balanced in player versus player, but who knows? The AI probably is not very good with them. Lastly, we have the EL.L2P. From the latest expansion, which just came out a couple days ago, the EL.L2P were not a very hard race to start off with from my experience. It's especially nice that they are not hampered very much by the dark season, winter. And they actually gain powerful combat bonuses during the winter, whereas during the summer they're more economic and friendly. Their main victory type is quest. So when they, at the end of their main quest, they will have a victory quest given to them instead of the ability to build a wonder. And through that, they can complete the game and win. I found them pretty easy to understand, and they would be a fine faction to start with, though probably understanding the base game would be better. So if I were going to suggest which races you would play your first game as, I would say Wild Walkers, Vaulters or Mizari, Drakon, Roving Clans. All these guys are a great way to learn the base mechanics of the game. And you could start your first game and maybe win it with any of these races. If you want to understand more specifically some of the game's general mechanics, then I would say the Necrophages are great for understanding combat and city building. The Forgotten are excellent for learning espionage and infiltration. And the Cultists are good for learning how to build productive, massive cities. They only get the one, of course, but there you go. Whereas the Vaulters and Mizari are excellent for exploring the tech tree and getting a feel for that, because understanding what is available each era to all the races is an important part of playing the game well, because the tech tree is complex and you can't really go back. It's full of permanent one-way choices, or at least it's inefficient to go back. And so understanding the tech tree is really important for the game. So that's it for my faction selection introduction for Endless Legend. If you liked the video, then give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more of the Learn to Play Endless Legend videos, then please subscribe. And remember, my friends, that it is all downhill from here.